welcome back to History in a Hurry. Today we're going to talk about one of the most significant but little told stories of exploration in the United States, and that's the story of the Pacific Fur Company. Now, this expedition was set out by John Jacob Astor in an effort to kind of corner the market on fur trade in the Pacific Northwest. It also reflects a little bit of the connections with Thomas Jefferson's vision of a second republic on the West Coast that would mirror what the United States would be. In effect, Jefferson and Astor were essentially arranging for Astor to become the president of a second republic on the North American continent. Now, Astor's goal here in this, as I said, was to corner the market on the fur trade in the Pacific Northwest and to kind of break the stranglehold of the Northwest Company, which was a British-based company in Canada. Now, Astor sends out two parts to this expedition. There's an overland component and an ocean-going component. Now, the ocean-going component would sail around Cape Horn in a ship called the Tonquin and arrive at the mouth of the Columbia River and cross the Columbia Bar and set up a fort. The overland component would then arrive shortly thereafter and basically make the connection there and begin setting up fur trading posts along the way. This journey was pretty fraught with difficulties throughout both components of it, between men deserting at various points along the ocean-going journey, to the difficulties in crossing the treacherous Columbia Bar, to the overland component running into problems negotiating up the Missouri River. So, not to spend too much time with it, but the overland component really has probably the more interesting elements to it. As they were heading up the Missouri River, the goal had been to follow Lewis and Clark's path into the west, which had been blazed about 7 years earlier. But the problem was that as they were headed up the Missouri River, they encountered notice that they should probably consider an alternative route because members of the Blackfoot Confederacy were known to be very hostile to whites who were crossing through their territory, owing to a degree the fact that a member of their tribe was killed by Lewis and Clark on their return journey back. So because of that, the overland journey decides not to follow the Missouri River and instead sets out overland, taking about 340 days to finally reach what would become Fort Astoria in modern-day Oregon. The fort maintains its trading relationships with the local tribes. The Tonquin is actually sent up to Vancouver Island to negotiate some trading there, at which point a violent encounter breaks out and the ship is destroyed. Approximately 100 native tribe members were killed in the explosion. The leaving Fort Astoria, Robert Stewart, member of the ocean-going expedition, leaves Fort Astoria carrying news of what happens to the Tonquin, as well as what is going on at Fort Astoria back east, hoping to reach St. Louis and then get word to Astor in New York. In so doing, on his return journey, he discovers the South Pass through the Rocky Mountains. Now, this is the significant element of this story because the discovery of the South Pass would later form a key component of the Oregon Trail. And so, in a sense, the Oregon Trail happens because these explorers had to proceed back over land to St. Louis. So there's a little bit of the connection between kind of our big story of the Oregon Trail and this kind of minor story of exploration. If you want to learn more about this story, and I highly encourage you to do so, there's a great book by Peter Stark called Astoria. It tells the entire ins and outs of the expedition, as well as a little bit of the background and the relationship between John Jacob Astor and Thomas Jefferson. This has been History in a Hurry.